Those who have wronged the others, they owe something to the people they've wronged. We're not going to allow them to profit from the independence they refuse to recognize. When you create harm for others, you dehumanize yourself.
We are pleased to be joined by Marlene Daut, a Haitian scholar, professor, and author of the upcoming book, The First and Last King of Haiti, where I wanted to talk about the region, maybe some of the harmful stereotypes, as well as what is discussed in your book that will be coming up. But first, I did want to thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, and the pleasure's all ours. So to start with this, like maybe some of the harmful stereotypes, when we talk about them, I want to start with the one that made national headlines this year, especially with it being the campaign cycle, where, the upcoming president alluded to the false story about Haitian immigrants eating pets in Springfield and all of that kind of nonsense. Can you speak to not even maybe just this lie specifically, but where lies like this come from and why they're truly so harmful to an already marginalized community?
Sure. I mean, these really, as you mentioned, these kinds of stereotypes really about Black people, about people of African descent and people from Africa, go back to the colonial era, go back to really, really far about prejudices that white Europeans had against people with dark skin and accused them of sort of all kinds of different forms of barbarity. And so this is just another iteration in a kind of long story. And it's very unfortunate that the target for this particular story was a population suffering. The immigrants who were legally there in Springfield, Ohio, the Haitian migrants to that area, did not deserve, of course, to be painted in this light when they essentially been invited there to perform labor that people in that town were not doing, and that was necessary. And so, during the era of the Haitian Revolution, we saw stereotypes like this as well. And really, the desire is simply for those in power to paint really those who are the victims of colonial systems, capitalist systems, exploitative systems as the perpetrators instead of the victims, and therefore paint themselves in the light of the victims rather than being the guilty party. And so that's what we really saw happen in this case.
Yeah, and I think that goes into my next question really well, where I think another way that that's used is to kind of justify like their racism or the racist actions or the things that they want to carry out on these groups. And another stereotype that plays into this that I wanted to tackle, and we've also spoken to, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but like the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, and we spoke about these kinds of things with them as well, where like it's kind of like where people try to attribute this culture to Haiti, where a lot of the people on the right want to point to the violence, maybe the corruption, like the gangs and these things, and they try to say that it's innate to like Haitians and Haitian culture. But what we seem to find is a lot of this is caused more by like outside interference, a lot of that by the US. Could you maybe speak to this as well, to the extent you're able to?
Absolutely. I mean, this is kind of the playbook of colonialism and neocolonialism, right? You institute dominant, repressive systems, violent systems, and then either walk away or are overthrown in the case of Haiti. And then the overthrown power just kind of creates more chaos. So we saw France do that in 1825 by imposing what we call the double debt, forcing Haitians to pay really, an exorbitant indemnity as the price of freedom, even though they'd won that freedom during the revolution. And then we saw this again during the US occupation of Haiti from 1915 to 1934. And the entire idea is Haitians can't govern themselves, so they need a foreign occupying power to do so. And then that foreign occupying power authorizes itself to use all measure of violence, which, if we think about it, is so illogical because what they're decrying in Haiti is violence. And yet they themselves, bringing Marines in, forcing Haitians to do corvée labor, they instate a form of violence in the name of human rights. And so over and over in the case of Haiti, that's what we see. And it's always the Haitian violence is justification for occupation or intervention. But what violence follows that or led up to that is kind of swept under the rug or made to seem not important or beside the point. And of course, it's exactly the point. You bring in Marines and they start harming the Haitian populace, then how can you say the Haitian people are harming one another? That's our justification for intervening.
And it's kind of insane how many, I think, parallels can be drawn between that and like what we're seeing happening in the Middle East right now and things like that. I did want to get into some of the things in your book, but I did want one more question because every time I talk to, whether it's like you to you now, the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, I'm always amazed by how it seems Haiti's never gotten a fair shake, like how much outside forces, whether it's France, whether it's us, are always like intervening in their economy, their politics. Has there ever been a period in Haiti's history where they were like free of this, able to make their own decisions without intervention?
You know what? That is truly why I wanted to study the Kingdom of Haiti. I've talked about this before, that this was the last time that the Haitian state saw true sovereignty. And by that, I don't mean that there weren't pressures from the outside world, that there weren't difficult moments and difficult things happening inside Haiti and worries about what was happening exterior to the country. But King Henri Christophe, who is the person I wrote my book about, the first and last king of Haiti, he instated a free Black kingdom that was determined not to be one of the playthings of the Western powers, whether that was the United States, Great Britain, or France. And in fact, when France kept threatening to reinvade so that they could restore their colony and bring back slavery, he instituted an embargo against them. That he said, okay, we'll just prohibit all French goods and French ships and French people from coming here. We're not going to allow them to profit from the independence they refuse to recognize and profit from the revolution they tried to stop and that they're now trying to overthrow. And this is, his rule was certainly imperfect, but this is why I think we need to study his methods, and we would further them and make them progressive and more radical. But here was someone who said, no, I'm not going to pay. The indemnity was a question during his reign as well. And he said, absolutely not. I will not negotiate on any terms that do not have the recognition of Haitian sovereignty as the de facto argument, as the de facto basis of the negotiation.
And I'm really glad you went there because your book is The First and Last King of Haiti, where I'm sure you dive into these concepts even more in depth than we are here. And you're talking about, which again, forgive me for pronunciation, Henri Christophe, I believe is if I'm close enough, even more so than maybe what you were just touching on. Could you speak to who he is, his significance, and why he is Haiti's first and last king?
Yes. So Henri Christophe was actually born on the British island of Grenada. At that time, Grenada, which is in the Southern Caribbean, was a British colony. And he eventually ended up in Savannah, Georgia, if you can believe that, participating in the American Revolutionary War at the famous Battle of Savannah. After that, we know that he ended up on the island of Saint-Domingue, which was in French hands on the western third that's now Haiti. And this colony already had the reputation of being one of the cruelest slave colonies in the world. So this is kind of the situation that he walks into. And he's there when the Haitian Revolution begins in earnest in August 1791. And he goes through some trials and travails in the beginning, but pretty quickly he finds himself as someone important, fighting alongside Toussaint Louverture, the famous Toussaint, and also Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Haiti's founder and first emperor. And in the post-revolution period, because of course Haiti declares independence from France on January 1st, 1804, Christophe finds himself as general-in-chief of the entire Haitian army under Dessalines. So he really gets his first chance to truly lead. Unfortunately, however, Dessalines was assassinated in October 1806, so he didn't have a long reign. And then the question became, well, who's going to succeed him? Now, the conspirators against Dessalines wanted Christophe, at least in theory, to be the successor, but Christophe was pretty wary of them. After all, they had plotted to kill the emperor, so what were they going to do to him? And so he kind of flees to the north of Haiti, where he's from, and he sets up a separate state. And that's in 1807. And 4 years later, in March 1811, his counselors of state say, monarchies, that's the most common form of governance in the world. Why don't you become king of Haiti? And of course, remember that the idea of a republic, there were only two republics, modern republics, France and the United States, and those both had slavery. So it wasn't a necessarily common sense idea that that was the best way to be free. So that's how he ends up being king in northern Haiti, a divided Haiti, where Pétion, a man named Alexandre Pétion, becomes president of what they call the Republic of Haiti in the south.
Mhm. So then how does that all come to end? Because he's also, in the first, he's also the last. So how does that end?
Yeah, so because he starts his rule in 1807, again, first as president, becomes king in 1811, but during that entire time period, he's fighting a civil war against the Republic in the South. And you have to think about the fact that up until this point, Haitians had, or the people who became the Haitian people, had fought foreign invading armies who were trying to re enslave them. And now they're fighting one another. And so this is a difficult time to rule. They also, as I briefly alluded to, have France kind of trying to retake them. They have the United States instituting a trade embargo against them initially, although it expires in 1810, but it still did lead to some deaths on the island and grain shortages, flour shortages. So they have some difficult problems. And Christophe tries as best he can to sort of rally the people around the original concepts of Haitian independence, which is independence or death. Liberty or death also is a motto. And he creates this beautiful culture of art and opera and music and buildings and architectural feats. But of course, in order to further all of this, he needs a lot of hands, a lot of labor, a lot of money. And so he institutes what's called the corvée, which is labor in lieu of taxes. So if you couldn't pay your taxes, you got sent to labor. And of course, this isn't really free labor. It's not slavery, but it's not free labor. And eventually there's a conspiracy against him after he becomes ill from a stroke. And this really leads to his downfall. And he commits suicide in October of 1820.
Oh, wow. And so in preparation for this interview, one of the things that I found, one of the parallels I think that you draw, and correct me if I am wrong on any of this, was that he kind of cautioned against imposing like a US style democracy in Haiti, I believe, and how this could be especially pertinent given like the current situation in Haiti, like the US meddling, I'm sure, and the recent assassinations. That seems to be a consistent theme in Haiti as well. Could you maybe describe what it was he was warning of exactly and how that applies to kind of the situation today?
Yeah, it's so interesting to think about it in those terms because I think we live in a world in which people just kind of say representative democracy. Of course, this is what we should have. And in the 19th century, again, that wasn't necessarily common sense. It was still considered an experiment. And so, in the political logic, because in the book, I spend a lot of time describing what the logic is, because most people just say, oh, he made himself a king. How ridiculous. But I really wanted to understand, well, why would this choice seem natural to him or a good choice to his counselors of state? And what they said was they felt like, one, they use this kind of patriarchal language, which is common in all monarchies. They say we need kingly power, the firm hand of kingly power, and hereditary power. We need to consistently know who our rulers are going to be for generation after generation. Therefore, in the case of an untimely death, an assassination, what have you, there's a natural succession, and that it can't just be one person overthrowing another person to seize the reins of power, which is what they accused the Southern conspirators of doing, which is in fact what they did. So when we look at it from the logic of what is actually happening in the world and the examples that they have before them, they say all the longest standing nations were monarchies at one point or are monarchies now. And that's what we need to do to move forward. So they have a pretty clear logic that's based in politics and in history, histories of sovereignty, really, of sovereign nations. And they put that forward to the people. They publish documents to explain this. They don't just say, we're making him a king and you have to accept it. They really try to explain it.
And how was that received by the people at the time?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting question because, of course, they don't have freedom of the press in the way that we think of it today. The press is a state-run press, but they call it a free press because they're saying we can say whatever we want to the world powers. It's a Haitian press, and we can talk back to colonialism. We can talk back to enslavers. We can talk back to the racists and point out their white supremacy, all things that they did with their press. But it also meant that not just anyone off the street could come in and talk to one of their editors or reporters and tell their story about something that was going wrong in their life or something they didn't like about the monarchy or the king or any of the other government officials. And so what we have in the newspaper are records of Christophe goes to various cities around and they shout, Vive le roi, Vive le royaume, long live the kingdom, long live the king. And so we don't get necessarily a faithful representation of how the people thought. But what can tell us some things is there were occasional revolts and rebellions, and that Christophe would have to quell. There were disputes that farmers would have. That was the name they used to describe the laborers, that they would have disputes. Naturally, when he would send somebody to prison, they would, of course, be unhappy about that and try to escape. So if that were to happen, the person would be executed. Obviously, people had things to say about this and would talk about it after his death, about these, they called them wanton executions. They felt that he was just a little bit too harsh and too quick to punish. And of course, they railed against this system of incarceration as well, because in the colonial era, every little city had a jail to jail fugitives from slavery. So you're thinking that you're dealing with a population that's been previously enslaved, that's been really mistreated. It's going to be very sensitive to anything that even a little bit smells of anything that was going on in the era of slavery and colonialism.
Yeah, yeah, great way to put it. So looking back kind of to the relationship between Haiti and the US, I want to talk about like influence and different Haitian influences and how they could be seen in the US, whether historical or ones that we see today. Could you kind of like maybe lay out what some of these are?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because the language that the Haitian revolutionaries used to describe Haitian independence is actually our understanding of freedom today. The understanding that we have in the world, not just in the United States, of freedom is not, even though most people, if you ask them, they'd say, oh, it's from the Declaration of Independence. But of course it's not, because that document is not related to enslaved people, which slavery persists in the United States all the way until the end of the Civil War, right? And beyond that, if you think about how the 13th Amendment doesn't actually outlaw slavery, just says, in case of in cases where somebody hasn't committed a crime, they can't be enslaved, right? Or forced to perform voluntary servitude. But in the Haitian documents, in the constitutions and independence, they say slavery is permanently abolished forever. They have no caveats about that. And they also talk about liberty and equality under the law, and equality in particular, that every person would be equal, not based on skin color or status or economics, how much money they have, that everybody had equality before the law. Now, of course, in Haiti, as elsewhere in the world, these were difficult precepts to put into practice, but our understanding of those things now is the understanding that is in the Haitian documents, that these laws apply to everyone, that they are not just for, gentlemen farmers or white males or anybody who's propertied, that our understanding of these as unequivocal rights is actually derived from the documents of Haitian independence.
So I'm curious your opinion then, if this kind of influence is seen from Haitians. We know typically when they come to the US, they make pretty good members of the community. I mean, immigrants commit crime at lower rates, they work at similar rates, like all that kinds of stuff. Why do you think it is that, what do you think was the catalyst for this kind of shift we've seen where America seems rather hesitant of accepting of Haitians or Haitian culture?
I mean, it's tempting to say that it's recent, but if we go back even further to the idea of under the Duvalier regime, Haiti had a long dictatorship, a father and son, Papa Doc and Baby Doc, the shorthand for them. And this led to what were called in the US boat people. So droves of Haitian migrants trying to escape the repressive Duvalier regime, trying to come to the United States. So there was already, anytime you have an influx of immigrants into a community or a country, this tends to create a backlash, especially if that country is founded on kind of like ethno-nationalism and ideas that immigrants are the enemy, because of course it's not just Haitian immigrants who've been susceptible to these kinds of stereotypes and violent, reprisals for trying to come to the United States. And so in the 1980s, in fact, during the height of the kind of AIDS HIV crisis, the CDC had actually identified Haitians as like kind of natural carriers of HIV. They call it the four H's. And this was just not true, first of all. It was completely determined to be false. But it further kind of demonized Haitians in the eyes of many people in the United States who weren't necessarily predisposed to specifically target Haitian immigrants. Again, that anti-immigrant rhetoric has existed for a long time, but that really put a target on Haitian backs. And that target, I think, was never really removed. For example, in the US news, and when something good happens in Haiti, you're much less likely to know about it. For example, when Haitians elected Jean-Bertrand Aristide the first time in this popular election, which was, many Haitians saw that as a moment of triumph. But the US news is going to be more interested in the coup d'etat that happens against him shortly after that and removes him from power. So creating this single story about Haiti where they are constantly in turmoil, there's political corruption, they're diseased. It's really just out of the playbook of anti-immigration, anti-Black stereotypes. But it's to the point, it's risen to the point where we can actually name it specifically anti-Haitianism. That is a specific form of anti-Blackness that we continue to see in the United States and really around the world against Haitians.
It is peculiar. It seems like there is this overarching anti-immigrant rhetoric, but then a few countries or nationalities or ethnicities get pulled out of that and targeted more than everyone else. And the way that I do like to end these interviews is looking forward. What do you think needs to happen in Haiti so that, I don't know if you'd call them mistakes or so or whatnot, but these errors of the past don't happen again, these kinds of things, they're not subjected to this kind of oppression, frankly, and they're able to have the sovereignty and freedom that they deserve?
I think that it's interesting to me when, the world writ large, writes and crafts these narratives about what should happen in Haiti now. That it still revolves around intervention, even though as people come to terms with it has to look different from what happened in the past. But the thing that I still see the world, and in particular the United States and the United Nations and France, wrestling with is the restorative justice piece. If people have been wronged, then there has to be restorative justice. And those who have wronged the others, they owe something to the people they've wronged, and they also owe it to themselves. Because when you create harm for others, you dehumanize yourself. You take away a little of your own humanity and that of your people if you're a nation. And so I think the best thing that the United States, France, the UN, all entities that specifically are not the only ones, but specifically have caused recent and long-lasting harm to the Haitian people, the thing that they can do is talk to people in Haiti and figure out what restorative justice looks like. Part of it might be reparations for slavery and colonialism. Part of it might be repayment of the unjust debt that France imposed. Part of it might be the United States repaying money that it owed Haiti after impounding all Haitian government revenue shortly before the US occupation. And then there has to be a piece where individual perpetrators are brought to justice as well, whether that is those who brought cholera to Haiti, during the United Nations quote unquote peacekeeping mission, which has been determined, to not be a kind of actionable crime, that people now recognize it as such, but that it's the UN, so, there's nothing to be done. But restorative justice can look different ways. And I think that in order to get to a place where Haitians have long-lasting sovereignty, there has to be a repair. This is a country that has been wounded from many angles. It will not miraculously heal itself. And if the world wants to quote unquote help, then they need to help in ways that the Haitian people want them to, not what they think out of their playbook is the way forward.
And I completely agree. I think as a bare minimum, all the things you mentioned should be on the table. If there's one thing I do know, though, however, from America, from the 40 acres and a mule promise, restorative justice is not our strong suit, definitely. So I do want to thank you again, though, for speaking with us. The new book, if people want to learn more about Haiti, I do believe you've written extensively about Haiti, but the new book is going to be The First and Last King of Haiti. Quickly, if you want to say, when's it coming out and where people could get it?
Yes, so it's out on January 7th. It's available anywhere books are sold. I'm partial to bookshop.org because their revenues go to independent bookstores, or go to your favorite independent bookstore. Seriously, Black owned if you can.
Awesome. And thank you again for a wonderful conversation and sharing your education and knowledge with us. And we'd love to have you back on.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Awesome. Enjoy the rest of your day.